Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring today's Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
And I'll say this to any dad out there. You need somebody to talk to, you're at your end, call me, send me a text, send me an email, because I will respond, because you need somebody else to be there with you. So many guys are out there by themselves trying to figure this out, walk it. It's, we can do better. We can do better.
That's Special Father Ray Morris. Ray is dad to Zach, 32, who has intellectual and developing disabilities. Ray's also the founder of Dads for Special Kids, and we'll hear Ray's story on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Say hello to David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
And now let's hear this conversation between Ray Morris and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Ray Morris of Rio Verde, Arizona, who's the father of two, a retired firefighter doing contract work for FEMA, and founder of Dads for Special Kids. Ray, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
You're welcome. Glad to be part of it.
You and your wife, Kelly, have been married for 34 years and are the proud parents of two boys, son Tyler, 31, and older brother Zachary, 32, who has intellectual and developmental disabilities. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
I grew up in a little town called Lake Grove, south of Portland, probably about 30 miles, I think. Still there, but it's been annexed by a larger town called Lake Oswego. Moved there when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and lived there till I was 18 when I went into college. Then at 21, I went in the Coast Guard. My big thing when I was growing up was sports, playing football and track. That was for me personally, was my saving grace growing up in there, because I came from a dysfunctional family. My dad became a quadriplegic when he was 29, and that was in 1969, and I was 9 years old. I have an older sister and a younger sister, and after he was in the hospital, he got released, and he came home and lived with us, and we took care of him. We did everything. He needed a drink of water. We gave him a drink of water. We fed him. We put him to bed, got him up, all that kind of stuff.
That's pretty overwhelming to think that your dad at such a young age 29, would have become a quadriplegic. What were the circumstances?
Circumstances was my mom and him went out one evening with another couple friends, and my sisters and I were spending the night at his parents, grandpa and nana, we called them, and we were going to get up the next morning and go see an uncle had a farm down outside of Salem, Oregon, and we're going to see the new baby lambs that were born. Well, they went out, they came home. The other couple got in a big fight. The lady took an overdose of sleeping pills. Her husband called my parents because he had been drinking, and my dad went over and picked them up and was taken to the hospital, because back then there wasn't ambulance services. I mean, we were out in the sort of the country area. So they were driving to the hospital, and a drunken driver was coming down the wrong side of I-5 in Portland, and they collided, and he had a C3-4 fracture.
Yikes. It sounds pretty heavy. And I can only imagine what your mom's situation was, raising you and your sisters, and then, now your dad, who, is even more needy than, you and your siblings.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is my dad was 18 and she was 15 when they got married. So she was really young. Neither one of them had ever graduated high school. My dad eventually, later on, he got his GED, but my mom never did. Rough thing about my mom was she identified herself as my dad's caregiver. That was pretty much was her life. And so, but a blessing that comes out of this whole thing is that situation helped prepare me to be the father of a child with a disability.
Yeah, well, it seems like there's probably some grieving that took place, right? When your dad had this accident and the things that he wasn't able to do with you, the things you weren't able to do with your dad, the things that your mom wasn't able to do with your dad, just a lot of growing. I don't know how else to say it, but it seems like it was probably very difficult for everybody involved at some level.
It was, we'll just call it what it is. It was a soup sandwich. It was, it wasn't pretty. Everybody did the best that they could with what they had, the skill sets they had. And I look back and I see, I grew from the experience. So he passed away in 2001. We talked about, he drastically ached because he could never play football with me. He couldn't teach me to drive. He couldn't, do those things, but he learned how to be a man from a chair. The chair did not identify who he was. It was just part of who he is. He was still a man, still had hope, same hopes, dreams, and all that kind of stuff. So he found different ways and perspectives to meet those hopes and dreams and find new dreams and let some dreams die.
Yeah, well, like you said, you can look back on it now and realize it was some foreshadowing for your own experience, right?
Yeah.
So, thank you for sharing. I'm sort of curious to know, how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
It was strained. I mean, because I was a 9-year-old kid, and I only had 9 years of life experience. My dad was 29 and had, 29 years of life experience to draw upon. So there was many struggles. There was many arguments. There was many things because I was a 9-year-old kid, and I give him credit. He did the best that he could, but at the time, in the heat of the battle, you can't really, he'd make a complete adjustments and stuff. I jump ahead a little bit. My wife gave me some good guidance with my own sons, especially Tyler, our youngest, I call him atypical. Him and I were going at it. He was 13 years old, and we were clashing, and she goes, "Stop." She goes, "You're coming at this situation with your 30 some odd years of life experience, and Tyler only has 13. Who's the adult here?" So now, in retrospect, taking that information, going back and looking at the situation between my dad and I got greater insight. But at the time, it's painful, it's hurting. I would have greatly have loved to had somebody to talk to about it, and I know he would have loved to have had somebody to talk to who'd been in a similar situation to help provide him with guidance, because basically it was everything that took place within that house stayed within that house, and very little outside information ever came in to encourage or support or guide.
Yeah, it's tough. You're isolated. You're sort of alone, and you struggle, like you said.
Yeah.
So when you think about your dad, is there an important takeaway or two that come to mind? Something that you carry with you today?
Oh yeah, the biggest thing is I learned from him is because talking with him when I was older. I think it was probably about 4 or 5 years before he passed away. Is asking him. It was point blank, is, "Dad, how in the hell have you done it?" How, and he goes, "It was tough. It's hard." He goes, "But I've learned to appreciate a kind smile, a gentle word, a conversation. I'm still a man, but people look at me as I'm in this wheelchair, and that the wheelchair identifies me, but it doesn't. It's just part of who I am. And I can always look out there, son, and find somebody in a worse predicament than me." He started a support group for mobility challenged individuals up in Portland at the University of Oregon Medical School. And one of the things he shared with me several times was like, he'd be working with an individual, say he's a paraplegic, and their bad attitude, just bitter, angry, resentful, pissed off that they're a paraplegic. And he would turn around, he goes, I would trade places with you in a heartbeat just to be a paraplegic. Oh, and by the way, you got $8 million in a settlement. He goes, I became a quad at age 29 and I got nothing. So taking that, I learned, you know what? I can control my perspective, how I respond to situations. That's the only thing I can do. That's what he taught me.
Yeah, well, very valuable insight. Tough to learn it the way you did, your family did.
Yeah.
But, an important takeaway that hopefully will sort of be passed along, right, through generations.
Yeah.
And your family, and hopefully others. Like you said, your dad, was a leader from that perspective. If he took the initiative to help others that were in I heard you say mobility challenge situations.
Yeah.
And, that's part of his legacy.
Yeah.
Which is a really important aspect of his life.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about other role models, and I'm wondering, did either of your grandfathers, either on your dad or your mom's side, play an influential role?
The big one would be my dad's dad, because he was around the most. He was a groceryman. My dad was a groceryman. I started out, but they both jumped on me and said, "You will not be a groceryman." So I became a fireman. Yeah, he was. My grandpa, I call him Grandpa. He was there. He taught me the best that he could.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Well, thank you for sharing. So from what I remember, you took a bachelor's degree in human resources from Ottawa University and a master's in emergency crisis management from Grand Canyon University. I'm wondering, did you go right from school into the Coast Guard, or did you go to Coast Guard before you went to school?
A little bit of both. I graduated high school and I went to, it was called Oregon College of Education. Now it's called Western Oregon State University, to play football. And I thought I wanted to be a PE teacher. Went to school and I failed miserably, not in football, but in academia. I have a transcript, a physical transcript with a 0.92 GPA.
That sounds low.
It is a D minus. I didn't have the academic skills. I learned later that I'm severely dyslexic and have an auditory processing disorder. So I went into school to play football, failed miserably, but then I became aware of a volunteer fire department in the area, and I got involved with that. And then I transferred to a college called Hemimegaloencephaly Community College that specialized in fire service. So I went to school there, got by, but not very well. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I decided a wise thing to do is go in the military, get veterans points to get into the fire service. So I stumbled onto the Coast Guard and realized the Coast Guard is a fire department, but on water, because they do rescues.
Right.
So I joined the Coast Guard, did that for 5 years in Depot Bay, Oregon, the world's smallest harbor. And when I got out of the Coast Guard, I moved down here to Phoenix, Arizona, and got hired with the fire department right away. And then I went back to school and learned my learning style and got a bachelor's degree and got a master's degree. But I had to take ownership of my education. I realized that if somebody gives me a book and says, "Here, read this, we're going to have a test on it," I will go down in a splendor of glory. But if I could take that book and audibly listen to it and read along, my retention goes up. So it's just knowing yourself and who you are and how you communicate.
Yeah, well, our brains are each wired differently.
Yeah.
There's the average, people can read and write and, get through a typical curriculum. And then there's, wouldn't call it special needs, but different types of learning.
Yeah.
Some of us are visual learners, some of us are auditory learners, et cetera. And, if you don't know that at a young age, right, if you haven't been diagnosed, obviously things can be much more challenging.
Yeah.
And it's too bad that something didn't happen where that was diagnosed at an earlier age. But it is what it is. You can't change the past. And like you said, you have to take ownership of your own situation and make the most of it.
Yeah.
And I admire you for the perseverance that you've displayed in your not only educational experience, but in your career.
Yeah. Because I was able to take what I learned about my dyslexia and I shared it with my dad, who realized he was dyslexic. Then he went back to school and got his GED.
Oh, wow.
So that changed his life because he realized, and he became aware of books on tape, and he became aware of different learning programs through different organizations that were tailored to his abilities and his learning style. And I thought it was cool. It helped our relationship.
That is very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of curious to know, how is it that you and Kelly met?
The truth is I moved down here, didn't know hardly anybody. And I was on my motorcycle one day and I driving down Hayden Road in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I went by a church. It was called Trinity Church. It's no longer there. And I said, that looks like a nice church to go to. I'll start going there. And I met her in the church parking lot about 4 months later. And she's a native Arizonan, born and raised in the White Mountain Apache Indian Reservation. Her parents were school teachers. So I have a beautiful blonde Caucasian wife with Apache culture. So, yeah. So we met at the church. We were going to called a young singles Bible study group, and about a year later we got married.
And what does Kelly do for a living, or what has she done for a living?
She's a psychotherapist. So I am a product of her toolage. So
it's good that you can laugh about that.
Yeah. Yeah. She early on, when Zach was born, that changed everything, but she stayed home to care for him. And she'd always wanted to be a marriage and family therapist. And it wasn't until after he got older and things settled down enough where she went back to school, pretty much the same time I was getting my bachelor's degree. And then she got her master's degree right away and started working part-time.
Let's switch gears and talk about special needs, first on a personal level and then beyond. And I'm sort of curious to know, before Zach's diagnosis, did you or Kelly have any experience beyond what you were mentioning about your dad and the special needs that you grew up in?
I had some involvement with an uncle who was a double arm amputee from a logging accident up in Oregon. I can't remember. I must have been my early teens or mid-teens. I helped care for him, and then there was a boy in the neighborhood who can't remember. I want to say he had muscular dystrophy, but he was a chair user. And that was prior to Zach. Kelly, her younger brother, was what they called back in the day was a blue baby. He was born with one ventricle, but I'm not positive on that. So she cared for him, grew up having a younger brother, and it was just natural. You take care of your younger brother. And then when she was in college, she was friends and was roommates with a girl that had cerebral palsy and was her caregiver, and they were best friends. She was even in was part of our wedding party. So we were always been sort of around it.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it, not only from your young age of 9 with your dad, but a number of data points that might help put some of these issues into perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that, God must have been working on your hearts in different ways, up until your own personal experience.
Yeah.
So what is Zach's diagnosis, and how is it diagnosed?
I could tell you the word, but I cannot spell it. Yes, his diagnosis was called Hemimegaloencephaly. The right hemisphere of the brain is larger than the left. Normal pregnancy, everything. Ultrasound's done. We didn't know Zach had a diagnosis until after he was born. Kelly went into transitional labor. She pushed for 2.5 hours. Was trying to go down the birth canal. She could feel him. They're trying different positions. And then the doctors all of a sudden decided, child was not in a distress. We're going to go to emergency C-section. Well, they did that, and he came out looking like, I refer to him as a Saturday Night Live conehead. He had a 16 3/4 inch head, and it was cone shaped towards the back because he was trying to get down the birth canal. So they had taken her into the OR, emergency OR, and we're doing the delivery, and I'm outside with family members and friends, and all of a sudden, here comes a little incubator going by, and found out that was my child, and looked at him, and I saw this large cone head. I got a picture of it, and he's off going on a helicopter going to St. Joe's Barrows Neurological Institute. And my wife's in the OR, and I'm standing there going, what just happened? And that was the beginning of this journey.
Wow. So he gets rushed to a different hospital. Kelly's still, post-op, recovering from the delivery. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit longer, given the fact that it's a C-section versus a natural birth.
Yep.
Did you stay at the hospital with her, or did you?
Oh yeah, I stayed with her.
Okay.
I stayed with her because it was like, I'm not going to be able to do. For me, that's that. I mean, there's nothing I can do, but I can be here for her, and that's the priority. It was her, and in retrospect, looking back, we have an ultrasound of Zachary with this large head, and you compare it to Tyler, our youngest son, and you see this dramatic difference. We look at it, it was like God blinded everybody because we didn't have to go through the decision of to do an abortion or not. So we have no bad feelings, no nothing, because we accept it. It's not going to make any difference. All it does is take away the joy.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. So Zach goes off to a different hospital. How does the story transpire? When do you get there? When does Kelly get there? When do you really learn about what the situation was?
I went home that night. The next day went back to the hospital, and that night pretty much was just, I don't know if I slept or not. It was just, okay, what is going on here? What's blah, 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 blah. We have no idea, but I had this sense of peace. It was like, okay, it is what it is, but it's all going to be, it doesn't have to be bad. So the next day went to the hospital to see Kelly. She got released late. I think it was late in the afternoon because they were scrambling because they knew that they had goofed up. I'll say, because the doctor was like, probably saw the ultrasound, and now it's, realized, oh shoot, blah, blah. So we got out of there. I think we went that late afternoon, went down to the Barrows to see Zachary, saw him just briefly because he was in NICU. But there's no distress. He was in no distress. Heartbeat's normal, respiratory's right. He just had a large, large head. And then we had a meeting with the doctors. In retrospect, it was comical because my wife, Kelly, and I are sitting at the end of the table, and they're all down at the other end of the table. And they're like, your son has hemimegaloencephaly. We've only seen it once here, but not this severe. We contacted the leading institution up in Toronto, Canada, and they're recommending that we go and remove the large hemisphere of his brain because he's going to have uncontrolled seizures. And when we do that, he'll be pretty much like a vegetable.
Yeah.
And we're just sitting there going, you know. So, and I asked it, or somebody asked, I was like, well, has he had any seizures? No, but he will. Then we're like, okay, so that was that. And then the next day, they released him. And they said when he starts having, he hasn't had seizures yet, but when he starts having them, bring him back, and we'll make the decision on what to do. And we said, well, we're not leaning towards the brain removal. We'll just, we'll see. And that was it. It was probably when he was 3 years old, 2 years old, he started having a few seizures, but nothing dramatic. He has seizures, but nothing real dramatic.
So is there any advice that you got beyond the initial advice, which didn't sound like the path you wanted to go down, that helped you put this all in perspective? I'm just sort of like, I don't know that there's a handle to hold on to.
Nope.
Based on what you've just described, he's in the NICU, but it's more like a precautionary measure. And then they realize that everything is it is what it is.
Yeah.
There's nothing that he needs to be in the NICU for. And he goes home. You said that he didn't have any seizures, anything of any consequence for quite some time. What path were you on? I mean, what guidance were you getting? What were your expectations?
We weren't getting any guidance from anybody. Kelly's folks were there, and they were hurting, they were struggling, and they were trying, but they were drawn upon their own experience with their youngest son, David, and the heart condition, which, the doctors thought he was going to die. And they, a year before, I think it was, they did an elective surgery that was controversial, but turned out to be successful. So we were leaning upon them because they had been down this road a little bit. The greatest support we got besides from them was from John and Nikki Kilroy, I would call them our lifelong friends. They've been around Kelly and I and Zach before Zach was born. And they were devastated too. But they basically just came alongside and was just there. They shared, they spoke a little bit, but they didn't come up like, oh, here's a game plan, here's an answer, here's a solution, they were just there. They were there to listen to us, let us lean upon them, let us grieve with them. They grieved with us, and that was huge. That was huge to have somebody grieve with you. Not grieving because they're grieving, but they grieve because you're grieving. I think that was the biggest support. But it drew Kelly and I closer together. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to drive you closer together, or it's going to separate you. And we chose to allow it to drive us closer together.
Well, I think of John and Nikki Kilroy as like the angels that show up in your life. You can't predict where they're going to be or who they're going to be. And you just have to count your blessings that you have somebody like that, because it's not always the case.
Oh, yeah, it is. I just talked to him earlier this afternoon. I was talking to them on the phone and just laughing, and they ask how Zach's doing. And I tell them, hey, that little son of gun's just doing great. He's got his own little world. He's happy. He's doing his thing. And they just laugh. And you got to have people like that in your life. It's your choice to have them or not. You got to be open. You got to share your grief with them and let them support you.
Agreed. So I'm wondering, was there a turning point along this journey that somehow made it a little bit easier, or there was a higher level of acceptance for who Zach was, what his abilities are, that allowed you and Kelly to sort of put this journey or experience in proper perspective?
That's a loaded question. It's a good question, though. It's like, there's two points, two main periods of time. One was when Zachary started having seizures early on. Tyler had just been born, and I was sitting in their bedroom, and all these questions about Zach. Is he going to live? Is he going to die? Is he going to ever get married? Is he going to go to school? Is he going to, and I was allowing, in retrospect, I was allowing all my dreams and hopes for Zachary of what I had to die. I had to let them go. And I had to find new hopes and dreams for Zach based on Zach, who Zach is. So it was at that point, because I verbally said, and this was in a prayer, crying, grieving. Kelly was sitting there too, and was basically I told Zach, and it wasn't basically, I flat out said it. Said, Zachary, it's okay to die. It's okay if you can't make it. And that was one of the hardest things to do, even today, because it's at that point, I'm letting him go, and he didn't die. It was like he came back. It's like, okay, I've let all that go. I've let those hopes and dreams go. I've let my expectations go. Now I can embrace Zach for Zach, who he is. And that is life-changing for me, for him, because it's not about me, it's about him and who he is and who God created him to be. And I just encourage, for me, it was everybody to do something like that. If you have a child with a disability, let them go. Let those hopes and dreams, that your expectations that you have, because they don't need that. That's not who they are.
You made reference to the fact that Tyler was quite young, right? Shortly after he was born. So both the boys are quite young. And I'm sort of curious to know what impact Zach's situation has had on his younger brother, Tyler, and the rest of your family, for that matter.
Oh, major impact. Like a meteor smashing into the earth. It's just, Tyler, through Dads for Special Kids, Tyler made a couple videos just talking about that. And from day one, we let Tyler know Zachary is not your responsibility. His mom's and I's. You're not. We will never say, keep an eye on your brother. If we do say that to you, we're paying you, we're hiring you. And it's a job, because Kelly and I both know growing up what that's like, to have to care for a disabled family member. So, but Tyler's still growing up. He had issues, he had that, he had a brother with a disability and other kids, but we were blessed because with our neighborhood, with other kids, they accepted Zachary. Zachary was out there, Zachary playing with them, hanging out. We early on let Tyler know, because I personally did it. I'm going to see a therapist, Tyler. I'm going to go talk to a counselor. So Tyler learned that, hey, it's okay to go talk to somebody about things in life. And so he's done that. So I think that was a major impact for his mental health and his whole being support. We've talked to him about it, and always, try to have open communications. Like, we'd hire him to be the babysitter for Zach when he was older. And so we could go out on a date, go to a movie or something like that.
Well, thanks for sharing. It sounds like there's been a certain level of maturity that Tyler's experienced, beyond perhaps the chronological age that he was at, just having a better understanding or appreciation for, things that are different.
Oh, yeah.
So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about this Dads for Special Kids that you started. When did you start that? What were you thinking? And how has it transpired?
Wow. I can't even remember how long ago I started it. It's got to be 20 plus years ago. And it started out of my own pain, my own grief. When we got connected up with raising special kids, there was groups to support moms. And moms are very active in early intervention with children with disabilities, because moms are emotional creatures, and that's the way they serve, and they're pouring out. But there's nothing for dads. For me personally, I have a foundational belief that God doesn't make mistakes, and my son Zachary is created perfect. Our culture may say he's broken, but he's not. And if I believe Zach's the perfect son for me, and I'm the perfect dad for him, then maybe I need to grow and learn and change. Zach is who Zach is. He can grow and learn. So it provided me an opportunity to grow and learn. So I wanted an organization, and I wanted to be around other men that were on the same journey, the same mission. And so that's what it is. It's about an organization that supports dads to say, hey, I got a 32-year-old son with autism, severe cognitive delay. Let me help you learn from what I've learned, learn from what I've been through, so I can hopefully improve your quality of life and your family's quality of life. Oh, and by the way, let's keep the marriage intact. Let's keep you in that child's life. Men and women emote differently, and we respond differently. And I wanted a place where men could come in, and if they want to cuss and scream about what's going on inside of them and what they're feeling, they can do that, because that's how they feel. And we need to start learning how to articulate how we feel about our children. Like when I can start, like you guys saw me, I start talking about Zach, and I'll start crying. Because that's how much I love him and care for him. And all men feel that for their children. We just don't know how to do that, how to express it. And we need safe environments to do that.
This is on our hearts, right? This is I think of ourselves as kindred spirits, even though we've come at this from a different perspective. One of the most insightful things I think you've done, and I don't know that you would see that, is that you put a series of, I think I counted 30 or some videos together.
Yeah.
Where, you're just laying it out there individually, right? Talking to the camera or talking to the audience. You've involved Kelly in a number of these. So we've got the mom's perspective. And like you'd mentioned previously, Tyler's been involved, right? And sort of sharing from a sibling's perspective.
Anger. What makes me angry? Not a lot makes me angry. It takes a lot for me to get angry, but when I do, I blow up. There's specific things that make me trigger happy. The R word. That is literally like someone stabbing me. I can't even explain how much I hate that word. It is such a cruel word.
So you've been doing a lot of things that would appeal to a number of different audiences. The dad straight up, and then you'd be blind if you didn't have an understanding that the siblings are impacted, right? Not always positively, right? We might like to emphasize what the positive impact is, but let's face the facts. When you've got a bomb going off in your family, you're just trying to do whatever you can to hold things together, and some of the collateral damage unintentionally could be, the impact on a sibling, right? Because the time and the resources go toward the emergency, and you're like, oh, he's okay or she's okay, right? They don't need us, right, as much as our son or daughter, with the special needs us.
Yeah.
They don't want to wake up a year or a decade or more down the road and saying, coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? I took my eye off the big picture, right? Making sure that I was present for everybody in the family. So you've done some amazing things, particularly with your videos. I think of those videos as like an archive that you've created. And then the question or the challenge is, how do you get people to engage? That's the big challenge.
That's it. And I think, you you triggered something to me. You said the big picture. It's like, yeah, we have to be able to see the big picture, but we have to be, I don't want to say obedient, but we have to be aware of that every once in a while, we got to focus in and take care of something. Like we've tried to focus in on Tyler to let him know you're still important. We love you. Yeah, Zachary's taken up the majority of this stuff. And you know what? It sucks, but we still love you. And we make special opportunities and times with them and doing that. And it's popping in my head. I met with another dad, a guy named Chris today. Father has two boys, one with autism and we call it a typical kid, and just sharing with him. And he's been doing the same thing. He's been, got to look at the big picture, but then I got to make with my typical son special time with him to validate and support him, because you don't want to wake up in 10, 15 years and realize, whoa, I missed that. If I would have learn from me, learn from if I would have, do that so you don't have to be sitting here where I'm at going, oh, wow. And that's why I want Dads for Special Kids. I would love is to be that organization. Older dads, hey, help those younger guys. We can have a healthier outcome. Oh, we can keep the family together. Oh, we can have better students. We can have a better society because we keeping the family together.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of the category of advice now, and you've certainly shared a lot, but I'm wondering if there's something else beyond what we've discussed, a word or two of wisdom that you can share with our listeners.
I would have to break it into categories. First, to the dads. Love your child for who they are and allow them to love you their way. That means you have to grow and change. Don't try to force them into your little box or your expectations. Let them be who they are. That's the way they were created. There's not a magical pill that's going to fix your kids. That's just the way God made them. If you want to get mad at God, great, get mad at God, then get right with God and get on the same page so you can move on. Wives, let the dads grieve in their language. I use the analogy. I'm in grammar school when it comes to emotional expression. My wife has her PhD. I'm going to express my emotions in 3 or 4 sentences, and she can do it in a 30-minute dissertation. Same emotions, just articulated different. Men need to mature and grow in their emotional expression, and when you throw your emotions on top of theirs, it shuts them down. Okay? Grandparents, deal with your grief about the grandchild. Don't throw your grief upon the parents of that child. They're dealing with enough. Grieve off to the side. Get your own grief taken care of and work on your grief. Come alongside your children and support them. Don't add to their workload. They're struggling enough as it is. And just love one another and accept things.
Yeah, great pieces of advice. Thank you for sharing. I'm sort of curious to know, why is it that you've agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
Hey, hopefully this video explains it.
Well, let's just leave it at this, Ray. This is what you've been doing. We're thrilled to have you. You're like one of these mentor fathers on steroids, right? And, this is your calling, right? I don't know if it's about calling, but it's a calling of yours.
Yeah, it is.
To take this experience, the life's experience that you've had from the time you were growing up as a 9-year-old with a quadriplegic dad to all these other experiences we talked about, the primary one being your own experience, the experience you and Kelly have had raising Zach and Tyler, and trying to turn that into something positive.
Yeah.
Right? Not only for your family's benefit, but to say, hey, I made some mistakes, learn vicariously through my mistakes so you don't make the same mistakes. And then, maybe you can emulate some of the things that I got right.
Yeah.
You can save yourself some time and aggravation and be more present for your spouse, for your kids, and, in your community. However people define that, right? Everybody's different. Let's give a special shout out to Luis Mendoza of the Washington State Fathers Network for helping connect us. They do great work.
Oh, dude's phenomenal. And he's welcome to move down here to Arizona. If he wants to move to Arizona, you're welcome.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, just thank you to everybody. Thanks for taking the time. If you're watching this, listening to it, thanks. And if I said something that triggered you, I apologize. I wasn't meaning to, but just give yourself the grace to grow and learn, and don't walk it alone. There's other people out there that can walk with you.
So if somebody wants to learn about Dads for Special Kids or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Through ray@d4sk.org. And I'll say this to any dad out there. You need somebody to talk to. You're at your end. Call me. Send me a text. Send me an email. Because I will respond, because you need somebody else to be there with you. And I get irritated that so many guys are out there by themselves trying to figure this out, walk it. It's, we can do better. We can do better.
I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Thank you. Ray, thank you for your time and many insights. As a reminder, Ray is just one of the dads who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Ray, thanks again.
Thanks, brother. God bless you guys.
And thank you for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, presented by the Special Fathers Network. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for fathers to support fathers. Go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Dad to Dad podcast was produced by Couch Audio for the Special Fathers Network. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.